Hey, welcome back. It's Sarah from Roadworthy. I've had a great reading week, which is always exciting. I have had a great week cleaning. Right now, I'm currently obsessing on how to clean upholstery. I took a load of stuff to Goodwill, including this off-white love seat. And the love seat is just, it's just dirty, right? It's off-white. And then just from like hands and sweat and oil, stuff, right? It's just dirty. And I took this load to Goodwill and I started taking out the love seat. And the guy's like, oh no, we won't take that. That's too dirty. And I was telling a friend, like, oh my God, I was rejected at Goodwill. And she was like, how's your self-esteem? So now I'm obsessing on how to clean that thing so I can give it away. But I'm also looking at like some of my other chairs and stuff thinking, oh, these could probably use a cleaning too. So anyway, I'm like investigating, do I hand clean? Do I invest in the steam extraction cleaner? Do I just borrow my friend's, he has a rug cleaner with an upholstery attachment. Do I just borrow that? Anyway, so I'm obsessing on that. And yeah, that's what I'm up to. So, what else? So, what have I been reading? All right, let's start here. I read The Bridesman by Savoy Liebrecht, translated by Gilah Kahn-Hoffman. This is a 150-page novella. And it's really told in two halves. So the first half, we have Micah, our 9-year-old narrator, describing meeting Adela for the first time when she's 18 years old, and she comes over to meet his uncle Moshe, who's in his late 30s, and as a potential groom for her, and she's a potential bride. So this family lives in Tel Aviv. It's a very it's not clear to me what time period this is. I mean, I feel like it's like the 60s, the 70s. Like, I don't feel like this is, way in the past. This is a very traditional Jewish family. So it sort of reminds me of, in the book of Jacob by Olga Tokarczuk, just some of the characters, again, a very traditional Jewish family. They go to synagogue together. They have their Sabbath meal together every week. And, family business is discussed, which is why Adela was invited over on Saturday night to meet the fam. And the family is not pleased with her. She's disabled, so she has, one of her legs is shorter than the other, and she wears very thick glasses. So the family is sort of against her, and they perceive some of her actions as rude. She's an orphan. She lives at a girls' boarding school. So she doesn't have a lot of prospects. And Uncle Moshe is also disabled. And so the way it's sort of set up is, you have the aunts who are all against her, and they're sort of like Cinderella's sisters, they're just sort of like nasty harpies, and then all the uncles are against her too. and Uncle Joseph, or excuse me, Joseph, is the sort of the patriarch of the family. And so, you know, the uncles are sort of, you know, ogres. And she's the damsel in distress, right? And so it's sort of the battles that go on and the power struggles in this very traditional patriarchal family of this 18-year-old girl stepping in and going to battle. And it does end with her marrying Uncle Moshe. Micah, our narrator, is her bridesman. And he ends up, his family ends up emigrating to LA. And that's how part one ends. And then part two is Aunt Adela contacting him saying, please come and visit me. Now, he hasn't spoken to her since he was 15. And it's sort of this Cinderella story. You know, she's incredibly wild, successful businesswoman. And he's like, what happened? Right? And so the second half is really her telling her tale of how she battled this very traditional patriarchal family for her and Uncle Moshe's independence under the rule of Uncle Joseph. Yeah, sort of what happens, the disintegration of this family. It was a super page turner. You know, it's one of those books where you realize, you know, he has his perception of what happened. And then as she's telling her version of the story, you realize, you know, sometimes, you know, he didn't really have all the facts. So it's just, again, how your truth isn't necessarily the truth. So I like I said, this was a real page turner, and I enjoyed this. Also finished American Precariat, Parables of Exclusion. And this is an essay collection narrated by Zeke, Caligiuri, yes, and several other incarcerated writers. So there's like 15 of them that are involved, and they are all part of the Minnesota Prison Writers Workshop. This is a collection of essays written by various writers, not necessarily incarcerated writers. So they touch on homelessness, mental illness, student debt. There's a transgender writer's essay in here. And then so all different kinds of essays describing situations or people who are living in these very precarious circumstances. And in some cases, they're sort of pushed over the edge, and in other cases, they're you know, they remain sort of living in this precarious border. And then in between each essay was a conversation between some of the editors. And very often, sometimes they're talking about the essay in particular, but very often the essays become a launching point for some other conversation. And those conversations were really interesting. And I felt like by the time I got to the end, I knew some of these people. And, you know, some of these essays were incredibly emotionally impactful. There's one on the friendship between these two cellmates. And one of them gets ALS. And it's sort of what happens to their, you know, their friendship. It was heartbreaking. And And then there was another one on mental illness where, there's a young man who was he was a child soldier in Liberia, emigrates to the United States, and in his early 20s developed schizophrenia, and he runs into trouble with the law several times. He's homeless. Periodically, he does get brought to the emergency room a few times, and it's just so upsetting how many times he's clearly mentally ill and how many times he didn't get the care he needed for a variety of reasons. And of course he ends up in prison. And again, it's just disturbing how many, there was a statistic there are 10 million seriously mentally ill people in the United States, and 2 million of them are in prison. Anyway, very upsetting. But those two, just incredibly emotionally impactful. And the essays I think that were most impactful were those ones where the writer was really speaking about their own personal experiences, or experiences very close to them. So this was a great collection, amazing collection, and I really encourage people to pick this up if they can find it. So the last thing I finished was Breaking and Entering by Don Gilmor, and this is long listed on the Republic of Consciousness Prize here in the United States Canada list. I loved this book, and I think it's because the narrator is, a 50-something woman, just like me. There were definitely aspects of her that I definitely identified with. So let me just step back to say, Beatrice is, she, at the first half of the book, you really get the sense of, she feels this staleness and ennui and just stifled as a person, and she, there's just this sense of entrapment and claustrophobia. She is in a marriage that I would call borderline hostile. She has a son in college, and there are several points in the book where she says, I don't even know who this person is anymore. Do we really know who he is anymore? He's not my 5-year-old kid. Who is this person? Her friends, you could tell she finds them sort of annoying and petty in some ways. And then she has her annoying sister and her mother, who is in a memory care facility, and her sister lives far away and is always second guessing everything that she does to care for their mother. So all of these, again, all of these situations just are, you could tell, are just creating this tension and this oppressiveness for her. And all of this is going on, and there's a heat wave. So fantastic. And then the second half, everything sort of explodes. So Beatrice joins a lockpicking club. And, obviously this is a metaphor for, freedom and escape. And, you can tell too, she really gets this feeling of power and control. And so, I'm not going to say what happens, obviously, but things happen in the second half. I can imagine for some readers, they find the second half much more plot heavy. But I loved it. I was along for the ride. It was like one of those things where it's funny, but also like, oh God, you know. There was a scene where she and her husband get into this fight over cleaning the closet. Classic, her husband hangs on to his clothes for 25 years. You know, she gets rid of all of her clothes that she hasn't worn for at least a year. And what was hilarious is I had just had the same exact argument with my husband exactly like 2 days before I read this scene. So, like I said, this book really hit home for me. And I loved it. Loved it. But I also recognize this may be a very personal, like 5-star love. So those are the 3 things that I finished. So great things. Still reading Singapore Grip. We're about halfway done. Still reading The Bead Workers. I picked up The Sorrow of Others. This is a short story collection that's also on the Republic of Consciousness Prize long list. And I started listening to Mercury Pictures Presents by Anthony Marra. So things are going great. I'm having a great reading month. Again, 2 months in a row. Woo, woo, woo. And that's it. That's all I got. So hope you all are reading some great things, and I will check in with you next week. All right. See ya.